I've been following this whole saga about the legalization of that was going on over at the Supreme Court, and one argument I saw, a lot of women use it, is about the guy who just has a kid and disappears, you know? He doesn't help the woman, doesn't help the child, basically the guy who goes around fathering illegitimate kids. So I started looking into it a bit to see, like, okay, but why do they complain so much if, like, there's maternity leave, the right to give the child up for adoption, a bunch of contraceptives. It's like no matter how much things are set up in favor of women, they're still going to complain, you know? They're going to complain and completely ignore the male side, which is basically men only have condoms, pulling out, and whether abortion is legalized or not, it doesn't matter. If the woman decides to have the baby, you have to take responsibility and all that stuff. Like in other countries, the woman can just put the guy's name on the birth certificate, even if he's not there, without a DNA test or anything, and child support already starts, right? But then I started looking into how things work here in Brazil, and honestly, man, if this isn't government neglect or basically a war against marriage, I don't know what is. To sum it up, here's the deal. The government treats things much better. The man who doesn't get married, doesn't take responsibility for his kids, who's irresponsible, gets treated better than the man who gets married, registers his kids, stays with his wife, and all that. That guy gets seriously punished when it comes to marriage and fatherhood. But the guy who just goes around having kids without registering them, without getting married, that guy's fine. That guy's off the hook. I'm going to get into the details. Basically, here's the thing. Just imagine this. The guy goes there, either gets married at the courthouse or just lives with his girlfriend for a while. Basically, that already counts as a common law marriage. Then she has a kid, he registers the kids, stays with her. From the moment the woman decides to file for divorce, the guy is totally screwed. He doesn't even have the right to ask for joint custody. The woman will keep the child, get child support, and take half of the property they're living in. And if he fell into the minha casa minha vida trap, she'll get the whole property. The guy won't even walk away with half the property so he can find a place for himself. He'll have to move back in with his parents or pay rent because the property's in the woman's name, even though he contributed, even though he paid, and she's the one who gets to keep it. So, in short, the guy did everything right. He was responsible, but the government comes after him with everything after the divorce. Even when he didn't do anything wrong, he wasn't the one who filed for divorce, he didn't cheat, he didn't do anything wrong. But then I started to look into it, okay, and what happens when it's the guy who gets someone pregnant, not in a relationship, not married or living together, and he just walks away, leaves the woman to deal with it on her own? That's the thing, man. I did some research and nothing happens. It's like this. I know that people in the legal field understand the legal side better. They'll justify why this happens. That whole thing about the Constitution, that a person can't be forced to provide evidence against themselves. But like, we're not talking about a crime here. We're talking about the birth of a child, you know? So just like there's a negative side for women, like when a woman just doesn't commit, ends a relationship for no reason, or cheats, the government is completely absent in this regard. And actually, through the law, it even encourages women to act this way. And then, in the case of men too, when they're irresponsible, don't take responsibility for the woman or their kids, the government is doing the same thing, just with less encouragement. But it's doing the same thing, also because the government doesn't go after them. I went to look into health clinics and the women's police station. Now, nothing at all is done about this. Basically, the guy just gets off scot-free. So he can keep fathering more illegitimate kids in society. And, you know, we all realize how single mothers are a real problem because the child doesn't have a male presence, and that's really missing. Plus, there's the poverty issue, since the guy isn't contributing. Like I said, I mean, if the guy isn't even going to pay, even if he doesn't want to be involved, if he's not even going to pay child support, he's just going to be free to keep making even more illegitimate kids in the world. And then I also looked into it, and basically, here's what happens, okay? There are ways for the woman to take the guy to court and all that, but at that point, you don't have the state apparatus helping out. Look, the woman has to find a lawyer and pay out of her own pocket, and we know how it is. When it's not a public service already handed to her on a silver platter, women just don't like it. They don't take action. When it's something she actually has to pay for herself, not something covered by public money, then she's even less likely to do anything. So she has to go find a lawyer. With her own money, she has to pay for the DNA test. And then the guy will get that summons to take the DNA test. And if it's positive, she'll have to register the child, which also comes out of her own pocket, since sus doesn't do it. And then women just end up doing nothing. You get what I mean? We can basically count on the fact that women hate spending their own money to get things, or to pay for things, and also on their laziness. And this is real because I've seen situations like this with women, divorced or retired, who had property tied up in court that she and her husband had bought together. And all the woman had to do was grab some divorce papers, go to the courthouse, make a few trips to the notary, and get everything properly registered. And they were going to get a property for free. They were going to pay off the remaining balance, pay off the property, and even so, they don't do anything, you know? So it's really a whole combination of the government's neglect, not recognizing that like illegitimate children and single mothers are a serious problem in society. Just think about the number of illegitimate children born in the last 50 years because of this neglect. And then there's also laziness, and the irresponsibility of these girls. First, for not taking care of themselves, for not choosing a partner properly, but second, for also not going after their own rights, They expect everything to be handed to them on a silver platter. So it's like this. It's a combination of government neglect and female irresponsibility that makes it so that the man who is responsible in society gets punished. He has fewer rights and less freedom than the man who is irresponsible. The man who's irresponsible in society, he's just fine, He's protected. He can just go on, forget the woman even exists, ignore any mail that comes to his house, just say no, not answer the phone, and just not care at all. And then, again, the government and women keep asking themselves, like, where did all the good men go? The good ones, Why aren't they taking responsibility for their kids? Why don't men want anything to do with marriage? Man, positive incentives and negative incentives. Whoever's more responsible in society should have more rights, more protection, more authority. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be the other way around. It shouldn't work like that. Oh, the guy who's irresponsible, who just does things however he wants, doesn't take responsibility. Like, no, that guy's fine. That guy's chill. Like, congrats, Like, when you start looking into these things more, you start to understand why everything's such a mess, And then you realize it's not just a mess now or just in the last 10 years. This goes way back.